Okay. Welcome back to Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. I'm your host, Lucy Gellman, and today I'm here with some of the creative minds behind Us versus Them, a groundbreaking documentary reimagining policing in America. So first of all, welcome to everyone. Thank you for making time on this. I was going to say beautiful Friday, but it's not beautiful. But it's beautiful that we're all here together. But the sky looks mad outside. So anyway, I'm going to read just a little bit about this film, and then we're going to get right into it. In a time when the conversation around law enforcement is fraught with complexity and urgency, the new dynamic short documentary film, Us versus Them, emerges as a clarion call for reflection, empathy, and transformation. Conceived by veteran law enforcement officials, with decades of firsthand experience, this film steps boldly into the debate, inviting viewers to confront the ingrained bad guy versus good guy culture that has long defined the American policing narrative. So I have plenty of my own feelings around policing in America, but that is not what this show is about. So Charlie Grady, I want to throw it first to you to talk a little bit about this film. And so let's start there, and then let's bring in other folks.
Well, first, thank you so much, Lucy, for having us on. You know, I'm a big fan of your work and everything that you're doing, so I appreciate the time to sit with you. This film literally is about the conversations that happen around the dinner table, but not out in public when it comes to law enforcement. So when you say you have your own feelings about it, we try to tap into a lot of people's views and opinions about policing in today. And the good thing about it was we started doing the film as an example of redemption and change, and how people that have once been incarcerated can turn their lives around and do great things to give back to the community. That's what it started out as. And in the time frame where we started doing the film, Alex and I would sit and we would, Alex is the director, we'd sit and we'd edit and try to get a different feel. And when the magic shows up, like, okay, this is it. We now have a movie. But it really focuses on the perception that there are good guys and bad guys in this world. And I say it very clearly in the film that at any moment, any one of us can be a bad guy or a bad woman, depending on the decisions, depending on the influence around us. And you see that people have been painted with the bad person brush for protesting peacefully. And there's some people that determine, well, they're a bad person because they were driving away or because they were following someone. And so this film, we didn't plan it, but the timeliness of this film is crucial. And we ask a whole lot of questions in this film, and we give a whole lot of details in this film. And so what I'll say lastly is that this film sparks interest, and it brings about the thought in everyone's mind, where do I stand? Am I that believer? Am I believing in all police officers are great just because they put the uniform on? Or am I believing that everyone who's ever been arrested is bad because they've been to jail? And so it really hits home when people start to reflect and realize that people in their own family are both. Some are, you got a police officer in your family and you love him and you think he's great, and the community may not. And you have someone from your family who's addicted to a substance or been in and out of prison. You love them. A lot of people don't. And so that's where the film goes. It begs the question of how do we as a society place judgment on others? And he who has lived the cleanest life cast the first stone. So that's where we're at.
I also, before we open it up to other folks, I want to ask you, so you are the founder of Hang Time, which works with folks in the reentry community.
Yes.
And I would say that you and I have had discussions about how not only does the carceral system, I think we can safely say, need major reform. I would say I'm more on the side of abolition. You're more on the side of reform. That's okay. That's another episode of the show. But we've also talked about how there are a lot of really entrenched and very harmful systems in place that undergird a lot of the things that folks end up behind bars for. So just when we're talking about things like violence, guns that are on the streets, substance use disorder, you and I have talked about, and I think a couple of years ago, you mounted a very powerful show about this. We've talked about how there are also systems at play that are really rooted in the foundation of this country as built by stolen people on stolen land. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to acknowledge that as we're entering this discussion, because it's a tender and sometimes hard topic to talk about. So let's hop in and talk about some of those discussions that folks were having where people said, we really need to make this a film. We really want to make this a film and bring the discussion in front of communities and make sure that we're getting this out in the open, that it's not just in people's homes.
So we started shooting the film about 1.5 years ago now, and 2 years ago. Alex corrected me, as he always does. And well, about 2 years ago, we started the film. And the film literally came about because I have spent 41 years of my life in law enforcement, in and around the culture of law enforcement. And as someone who's been in that field for so long, I started to recognize early in my career. It wasn't something that happened later. Early in my career, I had a disdain for the heroism and the bad guy mentality and things that, both sides would say about the other. I mean, you got people in the street that have never had a negative confrontation with a police officer. They just don't like what they see someone else, and you have the same thing. So it started out with a conversation. Alex, I wanted to say, hey, I want to do a film that really touches on the different mentalities that exist around the same structure of a system. And why is it so divided? Because I lived it. I lived in that divided system for a long time. And there's a lot of people that didn't like my take on it. And today, as this film makes the rounds, I've got some officers that I worked with for years that are looking at me going, why'd you do this? And to me, the minute you have to say, well, why'd you do this? You might be part of the problem.
Well, Alex, let's, I would love to bring your voice in, and of course the other folks on this as well. I feel like there's so much to unpack there, especially at this moment, that not to be political, but this whole thing is political, right? At this moment that we are living through. But Alex, come into the conversation. Tell us a little bit about your sort of your vision as you were helping sculpt this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us and chatting about the film. We really appreciate it. Charlie, if I remember correctly, like when we had worked on some stuff in the past, so we kind of knew each other creatively and whatnot. But he came through the door, so to speak, with the name of the film and the idea and the plan, like all kind of, ready to go. So he said, I want to make this film. It's going to be called Us Versus Them. I want to discuss policing. I want to discuss people who've been formerly incarcerated. I want to kind of get academics and all the whole kind of, everybody on all sides of this issue to hone in on this concept of us versus them, right? Where I come into play is like I don't have the law enforcement background, and I very much appreciate police and what they do and how difficult that job is. But we also see everything that's happening in the news, and it's not all beautiful. It's some of it's quite terrible, unfortunately. But at the same time, bad guys, some of whom are truly evil, and some maybe just made a mistake. And how can you get past that? And so. What we really tried to do is sort of like if you we don't know the through line of the story exactly when we start filming, but Charlie brought in these amazing people, two of whom you're going to hear from on the call today, Amir and Jeremy, and others who have just vast knowledge and personal experience in the world of policing, incarceration, and everything in between. And so as the filmmaker, we go in kind of saying, okay, well, let's hear everyone's perspective. And then let's try to build a through line to sort of, pay respect to everybody's perspective, and have it sort of hone in on this idea: what is us versus them? And I mean, what I'll say is, this is not a police bashing film. We did not want. That's not what this is about. This is about shining a light on a perspective that maybe people haven't really thought of before. And what I can tell you is, after making the film and after screening it and having our premiere, and friends of mine seeing it, some of whom are law enforcement as well, and most of who aren't law enforcement, because we had a really big screening premiere event. People just left saying we're debating what we saw and the feelings and the perspective that was kind of offered in the film, and that's really cool. That's what it's all about, right? Is what you don't remember every line of the film, you don't remember every moment, but you walk away with some sort of feeling that may or may not resonate with what you already believe, but it forces you to consider this new perspective, and I think we did that, and I'm super proud of that, and thankful to have had the opportunity to work with everybody on it.
This feels like a very good moment to bring in Sergeant Amir Williams. Oh, am I muted?
Hello.
I'm oh, sorry, Alex, were you going to say one more thing? So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of your story for us.
My life story, or
your life story, and also what it has meant for you to be in this film.
So to be in the film was a blessing. I thank everybody on the panel, everybody that's here. Thank you also. It was great being in the film. It meant a lot to me to be able to show or tell my story to a bunch of people that haven't heard it. Me just growing up and me just being the person I was, I got in a little bit of trouble. I don't really talk about that because of the fact that, I don't like to glamorize that. But the fact that I turned it around, I was able to help myself, help my family, help the people around me, and motivate the people around me. That's what the film to me is about. Not only me, but my family, and inspiring others that are going to watch the film and just help people get through a tough time.
I also want to bring up one thing that Alex said, that I promise I'm not picking on you, but you said, like, some people are truly evil, and maybe this is just my naivete. I don't want to believe that. I do think some people have psychopathic tendencies, but I don't believe that people can be categorically evil, and I believe that all people are redeemable. And so I'm wondering also if folks on the call, maybe Sergeant Amir Williams, Jeremy Brewer, I would also love for you to come into this and speak about your work, especially like crisis intervention, in busting through this belief that I think is very true, Alex, in this country, that some people are just evil and so they get written off.
So I can address that. I can attest that some people are truly evil. Some people like committing crimes and doing what they're doing. They don't believe they're evil. They don't believe that they're not good. They think what they're doing is making them feel good, and they love it. So we look at them as evil, and what they're doing is wrong. And whether it's violence, whether it's committing crimes, or whatever it may be, some people like doing that. I've seen it with me being incarcerated. You're never going to change some people. Some people are going to continue to commit crimes. They know they are. They're going out there. They don't even see anything wrong with it. Then you got some people that want to change. So I hate to disagree with you, but from my experience in life, people innately do what they want to do, how they want to do it, whether it's good or bad. And some of the people that's doing bad and that are doing evil don't believe it's evil.
I would invite you to disagree with me. I think disagreement's a good thing inherently.
The thing I just want to point out that what's so cool about Amir's story and about what was kind of discussed in the film is, like, the sort of needle has had to move so far in Amir's case, and in other people's case, who those people who are redeemable and who take advantage of the opportunity to, let's say, be redeemed or whatever that, should be categorized as. But those people who have made a big difference, who have really changed their lives. And I think that's the point in the film, is that, like, when you have changed your life, who's the judge of whether or not you're good or bad anymore? You did something bad once upon a time, and there's different degrees of what people have done, I suppose, right? And how bad something is, and that's very real. But at what point do we stop holding them? I can't. Charlie put it in a really great way, but, like, at what point do we stop holding them? As I jump in, Charlie, and help me. But, like, at what point are they no longer a bad guy and they've kind of crossed over and become a good guy? Yeah. And who's to be the judge of that?
Yeah. So Lucy, I feel, based on the experience in this room right here, you're talking to a film director, you're talking to 3 ex-cops, one's currently a cop, keeping in mind that we have seen the worst of the worst in people, right? And what I tell people is, when people make that change, the way Amir has, and what Alex is talking about, we as a society overwhelmingly oftentimes don't allow them to make that change, because we have one view. You were a bad guy, you went to jail, and they don't care all the triple work that you had to do, more than the average person, to become that tax-paying citizen, that normal husband and of the household and so forth. The work that people have to put in to overcome their past, their wrongdoings in the past, so often is not recognized, because people love to hold on to a label of someone else. We live in this world where people want to put us in a box, because I was put in a box and I hated it. Oh, you're just a cop. And then I was like, oh, you're a cop that does movies. Oh, you're a cop that does movies and plays. Oh, you're a cop that, now what box am I in? And, like, stop trying to put me in this box. So when we talk about evil, and I ask this question, there are people in this world that suffer mental health issues in the worst way. But if you ask the victims' families, was Jeffrey Dahmer evil? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. No matter what we think we can redeem, when someone is that far off the scale, yes, did something go wrong early in life? Yeah. And so as officers, I'll never forget meeting an individual and interviewing an individual just like a Dahmer, where he was, like, it was built into his DNA. And there's no doctor that was going to come around and take it away. And I'm talking about child sexual abuse. Individuals who have that propensity, those individuals are often seen by medical professionals as unredeemable. You're not going to change that desire they have, right? And so that's a debate for a different day. But when I realized that we as law enforcement, we see the worst in people, where most people don't actually get an opportunity to see the worst of the worst. And I work in redeeming people's lives. That's what I do. As you said, with Hang Time, we have the thing called Connecticut Hall of Change, where people have proven over a period of time that their life has turned around, and they're not going back to the bad decisions or the bad mistakes that they once made. Because I look at it as more as bad decisions if you go more than once or twice. If you continue to go back into the system, you're making a consciously bad decision, right? Because you can survive without, a big knot roll of money in your pocket and a brand new car. You can survive without it. But some will have that, you believe, oh, I got to survive. I got to feed my family. And most of those people aren't even feeding their family. They're riding around looking good in a new car with a pocket full of money, status. So I kind of look at it. I see where you're coming from, Lucy. But when you're dealing with people who make the same decisions, psychosis or not, and they're doing things to harm society, that's where that label bad comes in. But I also recognize that label can be shed. And that's what I work to do with people.
So I hear you. And I absolutely also agree that this is just because I want to maximize our time together. We could have a whole other discussion on this, and maybe we will. But let's get back to the film. I really want to talk about the film and putting this conversation in front of people. And I also just want to make sure, Jeremy Brewer, since you're on the call, you are a risk control consultant and a retired police officer. I would love to also bring your voice in and talk about, what you hoped to bring to the film and the discussions that y'all started having that you're then hoping to bring out into the public as this comes before the greater New Haven community and really like the national community. I think, Charlie, you said you just got back from where were you traveling from?
Oh, I was just down in Florida.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is getting its sort of fingers out into the universe.
Yeah, we're going to Massachusetts next week, and then coming back to Yale University. So we are getting it out. I'm working up a screening in Maryland, one in Chicago, Illinois. So we're getting this film out there. But Jeremy,
Yeah, please.
Sure. I didn't want to interrupt anybody, but as you can see already, there's so much great dialogue going back with just, the six of us on the call, we can have such great dialogue. I think what makes this film just so amazing is it asks really critical questions and it asks us to think critically. And I think as people, sometimes we get afraid to think critically or we don't want that level of pushback. And, to Alex's point, this is by no means a anti-police documentary film or anything like that. It just asks questions. So I spent 21 years in law enforcement, and I also worked as an EMT for an ambulance. So I got 27 years inside of this culture. So I took a lot from my experience working in this police culture and first respond culture and kind of asked some tough questions because there's something about this culture is that we don't like pushback. We don't like to be questioned. And if you consider yourself a critical thinker like I do myself, and you kind of start to push back and ask questions, kind of like Charlie said in the beginning, people kind of look at you like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? I'm over here going, well, wait a second, there might be a better way. And I do believe that law enforcement, for the most part, we have an optics problem. We think people like us when they don't. We think just because we play basketball once a week after school that just fixes all of the woes with juveniles. Like we try to put these little band-aids on things, but if you say it out loud, wait a minute, there might be a better way, all of a sudden you kind of get ostracized in that culture. And I think that my role in this film kind of asks that question. I still do a lot of training with law enforcement for crisis intervention. And what we've seen over the last decade is, to Amir's point, a lot of times we're going to calls that people say these aren't police calls. We're going to a lot of mental health related calls with, frankly, that we're really not trained for in a lot of these situations. So then things go badly and they're like, well, wait a second, but people don't know who else to call. So over the last few years, we've started to go with social workers together on calls. You start to see it in different areas. So those are little changes that are happening. But if you think about how law enforcement takes that, and I can tell you that because all of a sudden, when we first started doing this, 8-10 years ago, people were like, oh, I don't want a social worker on my call. And then all of a sudden we started to see, oh, this is effective. Oh, it works. Oh, what else could we do? So I think when you ask, okay, if somebody has been held accountable, someone has shown real change in their life, and now they're like, I want to give back to my community. And I know Amir has said this before, and I don't want to steal his thunder by saying this, but not everybody wants to be a cop. Not everybody who goes to prison wants to be a cop, right? There are probably a very small amount of people that's true. But if somebody has really shown, I'm talking real change, and when we represent the Connecticut Hall of Change, we only honor people who the bar is high. You can't just get out of jail and just do a few good things for yourself and you're going to earn this title. Absolutely not. You got to give a lot back to community and do a lot of things like Amir has done. So when you have people come up to that level of status that want to step back into a community and say, you know what, I can bring something here. And a lot of times, who better to know the other side of that than somebody who was on the other side of that? So I think the film at the end of the day, it just slows you down enough to think. You don't have to, like you said at the beginning, you don't have to agree. You don't have to disagree. I think it inspires thought. And any film that inspires thought, oh man, it was just an honor to be part of just to be having this conversation today.
I just want to add, I mean, Jeremy's really good at sort of hitting the poignant points of the film, but there's this whole piece about the culture in which we live in. And that's what I really was hoping to bring out. And sometimes people only want to believe what they want to believe, and they shut down the possibility of there being a different way. And what this film does is it opens up the eyes like, well, maybe, because I'll say this, the police officer who shows up at your door or shows up at your motor vehicle accident, you don't know where that person's been. They could have been a felon for 20 years. You don't know. But does it actually make a difference if they're doing the job that they're hired to do, passed the test, got a full pardon, did what they need to do? Does it really matter where that cop came from in that moment of need? Because they're there answering your call. And what we found is who it matters to most is the other cops who didn't have that battle, right? They'll tell you, I had to go to this university, I had to get this, I had to get that. And listen, I'll match a degree to real life lived experience in prison any day. I'd rather get my degree than have to go to prison and learn it. Because the people coming home from prison have that felony on their back and they can't shake it because society won't let them shake it. And in this film, we talk about that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can get into some of the discussions that are happening in the film. I understand and I'm sympathetic to not wanting to spoil things because we want folks to come and see this, right? And at the same time, just some of I feel like all of us are dancing a little bit around language, right? First there was evil, then there was even, Jeremy, you said you think it's an optics issue. Optics, systems, I don't know, maybe that's just a linguistic slippage on my end. So I want to talk about some of the actual discussions that are happening. And then, of course, for all of you, your big hopes and dreamy dreams, now that this is out in the open and you feel like it will hopefully catalyze some discussions that need to happen. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the discussions that are happening in the film.
So a couple things happen in the film where it challenges the public's belief on power, right? So the police do their job based on what the people want from them, right? Legislators want from them. And so that's addressed in the film in large part. The other thing that's really addressed is the depth of how far people have been within the system. We're not talking about, you don't go to jail for, stealing something from a store the first time. There's a history that typically goes along with it. And so we're talking in the film about how do we erase that history? How do we give someone an opportunity that has proven that they're done with that level of life? They're done with that. And so a lot of the discussions that we've had with viewers leaving from all ages, again, keep in mind, Lucy, this film was done to spark discussion about our systems and about our culture. And some of the greatest conversations and responses we've had have been from college students that have said, I never looked at it that way. We had a UConn college student came up to me after, and she said, I was going to school for my law degree so that I could be a prosecutor. She says, but watching that film, realizing how unbalanced and unfair our system can be, I think I'm going to now be a defense attorney. Now, for me, that's huge. That's absolutely incredible that a person could watch a film for 40 minutes and change the way they view the legal profession and where they want to be within the legal profession. That's huge. So again, tiptoeing, listen, I say it all the time. There's a culture of heroism that comes along with cops, and not every cop's a hero, period, the end. They're willing to be a hero by putting a uniform on and a badge, but I work with too many of them that would go the opposite direction when shit got heavy. And, that doesn't make them a hero. And again, we're not shitting on cops. We're pointing out facts. We're pointing out things that actually divide us and hoping that we have better discussions about it.
Well, I also think too, Charlie, without giving anything away, like you said, it's a dance, right? One of the big things you say in the beginning is that we live in a world of gray. And I think when you really think about that, and then you start to follow the different stories and the different paths of the people who are in the film, you basically start to realize we have more in common than you think.
And the creativity. So I'm going to give Alex a big shout out here, but don't let him know because the creativity that goes in the film is what really drives these messages home. Because for every scene, the music, the sentiment is driven by spacing, by did I really hear that correctly? And here's what drives the point home. The music underline a lot of it. As you can tell, he's a musician. He plays the guitar. At least that's what he tells me. But anyway, what's masterful about it is he added a layer of creativity, art to the film. And there's a scene where one of the cast members is talking about addiction, and Alex turned that into something of a masterful piece of art.
It's funny. I was going to say the same thing, but I didn't want to say it.
Thanks, Charlie and Jeremy and everyone. So I'll give you a little hint on the scene, and I don't think it'll give much away, but I thankfully have never been like addicted to a substance, and certainly lots of people have. And so I found myself trying to really understand it, and the closest I could get to understanding it was love, right? If you're fully addicted to something, it's because you love it. And actually in the film, the character who's talking about their experience with addiction talks, I think he says, actually, I loved it. And so what we did is, to sort of illustrate, constantly thinking about when someone's discussing a topic, how do we illustrate that through footage? Because you don't want to just look at them talking, and also we're covering a lot of edits, and so we created a scene to complement the discussion in that point about addiction of, a female, the male is the addict, and the female, it's all silhouetted, it's dancing, the female is, the substance. And as the story is told, you're kind of seeing that interaction of, it's almost like a love story between, the substance and the addict. And again, just a way to sort of be creative and illustrate a point and try to drive emotion in the film. Because once upon a time, before I did my first ever film, the producer said, well, if we can make somebody, I think it was if we can make them laugh, cry, and think. If we can squeeze those three things into the film, then, you have a great film. And so, between all of this, we're trying to hit emotions in people, because I think that's what they take away. They take away a feeling. It's hard, like I said earlier, it's hard to remember a line, but how you feel walking away, I think, is what you can really latch onto and have a lasting impression with. And actually, I'm super happy to know that, like, in the film, people are certainly thinking when they leave. There are a couple of moments where we get a laugh out of the audience. And I haven't seen it personally, but I've heard there are some parts where people have actually like teared up. And so, point being that we're hitting some emotional notes, and that means I think people are taking something important away from it all.
Just to piggyback on something that you just said there, Alex, is so important. So my wife, when she saw the film, and my wife could be critical on film, right? She absolutely loved it. And she said, here's the thing, here's my takeaway of a lot of documentaries. And I know Amir's not going to say this about himself, so I'm going to say it, right? Amir comes across as so genuine. Nothing seems acted. Nothing is rehearsed. That's the thing about these interviews. None of us, just to give you kind of how the sausage was made, none of us were given the questions ahead of time. So all of the answers that were given in these interviews were completely organic. Nothing at all. And that was the big takeaway that my wife had. She was like, everybody was so sincere. Nothing was rehearsed. You can feel that's how they truly felt. And I'll say this, Amir, and there's obviously other cast members who aren't here, but his honest breakdown is masterful. And again, Alex did an amazing job of capturing it and putting music to that. But I think that's something that somebody's going to take away from this is you don't feel like it's a rehearsed prepped answer. It just feels real.
The other thing, Lucy, is we have a former FBI agent in the film, and his story is remarkable. And he speaks openly and freely, and he speaks to his humility. And he's been humbled by his experience. He did over 8 years in prison for violating the law. And again, he's ostracized by some and taken in and loved by many. And so it really is one of those situations where, hey, you did this, this, and this. You're a scumbag. You're a bad person. My nephew did it. Oh, he's just got mental health problems. That's all. He's not a bad guy. He just, right? There's a whole lot of that we can point to. But I'll tell you, the real proof in the pudding is that we just showed the film for a private screening at Southern Connecticut State University. And the professors reached out to me at, I think it was like 5, 6 in the morning in an email saying, we need to circle back. You guys tapped into so much for these students. How can we bring this further? And it's kind of crazy. It's a great problem to have. But this literally has accomplished what we set out for it to accomplish. And hopefully soon it will be streaming, worldwide at some point.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, and I think I'll bring this to Sergeant Amir Williams first. As this is getting into the world, kind of your hopes and dreamy dreams for this. And I know you said you don't want to talk a lot about your own life story, but I will say you have a lived experience with the carceral system, and then in 2012 received a full pardon, and then in 2014 became a cop. And now work with people on pardons, which is not what everyone's lived experience is going to be after being in the carceral system. And so I'm curious, for you, what your hopes and dreams for this film are, as you're also having this discussion both with people in New Haven, like New Haveners, and with fellow cops, with fellow officers.
So I don't mind talking. First of all, I don't mind talking about my life. I don't like glamorizing what I did. So I can tell my life story over and over. I can talk about me all day. But
And he does.
but what was the last part of the question again? So I don't mess it up.
Oh, so sort of as someone who is having these discussions in a lot of different rooms, and with a lot of different folks, what are your hopes and dreams as this documentary is, making its way out into the public?
And just understanding a better connection, communication between law enforcement and civilians, understanding what police officers and law enforcement that the culture that law enforcement has when it comes to formerly incarcerated people. Sometimes, I'm not going to say sometimes, but a lot of the times you're wrong. I've met some of the most intelligent people in prison. They just happen to have a habit, or they made a mistake, or they continue to make bad decisions, whether they willfully do it or do it by accident, whatever you want to call it. But so they can come home and they can transform and they can take that, whatever skill set they have, whatever knowledge they have, even before prison, and they can transfer it over to law enforcement, to whatever else they want to do. So I just want people to understand that we are more alike than we are not when it comes to criminals and convicts. I spoke the other day on a podcast, and I basically just made him understand that criminals have a job, police officers have a job. At the end of the day, we both can be bad, we both can be good. Criminals so happen to be breaking the law. Laws change, and sometimes the laws that we once had, as far as I had a cousin that did prison time for marijuana at one time. Marijuana is legal now. So laws change, and people's behaviors really don't change. If you want to be a bad person, be a bad person. I know cops that are bad people. I know people that are bad people. I know people that are great people. I know cops that are great people. So we have more alike than we have difference. But what I want to get out of this film, I want people to see, is that we're all human. We all can get along. It just takes some communication.
Lucy, I say all the time, my daughter, my oldest daughter is like you. She's an abolitionist. She's like, do away with the cops. And I'm like, that sounds good. Um, but it's a long way off before any of that should ever happen because it's almost like the two-party political system. There's money to be made in the system that works the way it works right now. And the irony of the film is I've had cops that I used to work with say, so let me get this straight. You're promoting and advocating that everybody who's been a felon comes home, gets a pardon, that they become police officers? And I'm like, no. What I am advocating is that they have the freedom after they've paid their dues, after they've done their debt to society, that they too have the same freedoms as everyone else to go out and pursue a career that they really want to pursue and make a difference in their community, whatever it may be. Listen, the Connecticut Hall of Change, we've got doctors, we got people with their PhDs, you name it, we have people that have succeeded and given back. But all of a sudden, when it comes to a police officer, people get like, oh boy, don't know if I can trust him. You don't know if you can trust the other cop either, who never went to jail. So you got to stop with the double-sided, sort of view and these labels that people are given, sometimes justifiably so. But at the same time, if you've done all the work to turn your own life around and give back to a community that you once, listen, Amir patrols the same streets he once was a part of doing the wrong thing. That's the pendulum swinging all the way. And if you can't recognize that as a level of greatness and oh wow, I'm not saying that you have to look and bow out to Amir, but you have to recognize that in order to swing the pendulum that far, his road was much more difficult than the average Joe or Joanne that goes to become a police officer. Much more difficult because they had societal scarlet letter on them for a while.
I'm also curious how it feels to be presenting this documentary right now. Like clearly, Charlie, as you're talking, this is something that you have been sitting on for a really long time, really long time. And I'm happy that you're having these discussions because I think like when we have those discussions, they're for other people, but they're also for us, right?
Right.
And that's really, really important. And we are at a moment where we have a convicted criminal who is holding the highest office in the nation. So and I have plenty to say about, actually, if I believe certain people are actually categorically evil, but I'm not going to say that here. And at the same time, so we have that. And then at the same time, we see members of law enforcement at every level, municipal, state, federal, like committing truly heinous acts on civilians, right? And so I'm curious, does this feel like an even more politically charged moment to be presenting this? Does it feel even more necessary as you're getting this out into the world?
So Lucy, I'll jump in and then I'll let Alex, because Alex has a unique take on it as well. But here's my belief. My belief is that I know we did not create the film in anticipation of the moments we're living in. We created a film, as you said, based on my own personal experience, observations. I brought it to the table because I know of so many other police officers that have the same mentality that I do. And there's so many that don't. And just to give you an example, one officer that I worked with for many years, good guy, not a overzealous, aggressive cop from Hamden. I ran into him in Brantford, and he was so upset after the George Floyd thing. He's like, "Yo, man," he goes, he's a white officer. He's my daughter's best friend's a young black girl, and she doesn't want to play with my daughter anymore because of the George Floyd thing. And he goes, "That's a bunch of bullshit." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "So what have you done about it?" "Oh, nothing. I shouldn't have to do anything." I said, "Bro, you need to get in the car with your daughter and go over to that house and sit and have a conversation with her parents to show the parents and the little girl that you're not condoning the taking of George Floyd's life. And if you feel you're above that, then you might be in the wrong job in my mind. Like, if you're saying just because they feel that way, I'm not going to do it. I shouldn't have to. There's a whole lot of things that we do we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to lock our doors at night, but we do, right? So when you talk about the timing of this, I'll put it out there. We did not plan for this timing, but the timing is awesome in the sense of we don't know who's behind the mask of all of those soldiers that are out there hunting down brown people. And everybody knows this. This is a conversation that you can have with anyone. And everybody assumes that January 6th individuals are behind some of those masks. You know what I mean? Everybody's entitled to their thoughts and their opinion. Maybe it'll come out in the future. But here's an opportunity, Lucy. And I say this every time someone tries to make a comparison of what we're doing to what's going on with that agency that's hunting brown people. Here's an opportunity for local law enforcement to really highlight how professional and different they are compared to the hunters in the khakis. How that without color of law in place, you see what you see. But the police departments, the chiefs, you could never do all of that and get away with it for any length of time. What's happening with those guys? No local police department can do that and get away with it. That police department would be shut down. The feds would come in and investigate it and shut it down. I've lived through watching the feds come and investigate police departments for wrongdoing. So here's an opportunity for local police and the community to come together and go, hey, we don't agree with what's going on with the soldier people. So let's pull together and keep our community safe and tight. This is an opportunity for that to happen. And if a police department doesn't see it that way, I think they're squandering an incredible opportunity.
We only have a couple minutes left. And I would say, well, I believe and hope that that vision is true. I have no personal faith in our federal government to investigate any wrongdoing at this time, really anywhere. But I'm also just wondering, Charlie, I think you mentioned this, and then also Jeremy, you mentioned this, the resistance that maybe some officers will put up to, for instance, having a social worker or a team ride along. And we're starting to see in New Haven some, I think, exciting options that are presented as alternatives to policing. We know historically, right, that police do not have a good track record with things like de-escalation, especially with sexual assault or sexual violence, or mental health calls where folks may be in crisis. And so I'm wondering, for folks on this call, are you also hoping to see those sorts of changes to the system where there is more infrastructure or support that can move the needle toward a more compassionate and community-oriented model?
So, as being currently active in law enforcement, we are resistant to a lot of change. We have a company called Compass in New Haven. They do come to social work calls with us and for homeless people and things of that nature. We also have with a dispatch, they will call a sergeant or a supervisor and access is this a police call or not, and we can waive it off. So we are welcoming to it. A lot of officers are. New Haven is overwhelmed with calls that we go to that are, not police calls, and we have to deal with them. So instead of us dealing with some calls, we just don't, not to say we don't care, but we'd rather not show up, because if something goes left, then it appears that we were not compassionate or we didn't know how, or inept in trying to handle the call. So we do have Compass, and we do call off calls that are not police matters. So just to give you some insight on that.
So I have to jump in. I did a video with an organization called Continuum of Care in New Haven with a woman named Deborah Cox, who's wonderful. She's not the executive director, but help bring us in. We went along. We filmed Compass. I learned about what that we filmed an officer. I mean, it's insightful and I think wonderful that in the film. Lorenzo Boyd, who's a professor, I can't say his full title quite as concise precisely as he says it, but he's a wonderful guy and an incredible speaker, just like everybody here. But he talks about, not everybody needs the warrior to come to the rescue when 911 is dialed. Sometimes people need help for something that's out of their control, and I don't know the statistics, so I'm relying on what I've learned from Lorenzo and everyone here. But you're saying, like, what he says in the film is most of the calls that come in don't need a warrior. Somebody needs some help, and I think that insightful. And having Compass and hearing from Amir talk about that. So what do we need? Do you need when you call the cops? Do you need guns blazing, or do you need a compassionate human? And I think we're lucky that there are a ton of wonderful people who are police officers who are that compassionate human. But hearing that, they're bridging with organizations like Compass or bringing a social worker or building that into their training, I think is awesome.
I'll just throw in real quick, and I know Jeremy's itching to throw his 2 cents in, but the truth of the matter is, being a police officer is very much the same as being a nurse in an emergency room or a doctor in an emergency room. Some doctors are better than others at specific things. And unfortunately for the general public, you don't get to pick the officer who shows up at your door, right? And that officer may have less empathy than someone else showing up at your door. So when you talk about Compass, and they're a great organization out of Hartford as well. Jackie Santiago's the CEO, fantastic organization, and Continuum of Care, Hang Time works in partnership with them. In fact, we have our Hang Time meetings at the Continuum of Care in New Haven. But what I want to point out is that until we stop hiring people the way we've been hiring them over the generations, we're going to continue to have the same issues, right? And so when you really want change, and you'll love this abolitionist motto, is like you have to clean the slate and start new with. So I tell people all the time, you cannot hire someone who has very low-level emotional intelligence and lack of diversity in their world, and then stick them in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in the heart of urban communities from suburbia, and expect them to be able to connect and be a great officer in that community at capacity. That takes time. And what happens is our system is set up where we got to get officers on the street. So now we start to look at standards a little differently, and we start to get the political nephew's cousin in the job and so forth, rather than really putting people in that we have sort of cultivated based on their own life lived experience, bringing that to the table, which is another reason why Amir is so unique and so valuable, is because he brings something to the table that a lot of people don't. And so I just think when we talk about the systems in place, we need to start at the beginning. And Dr. Boyd has said that as well. Most of the people coming out of the academies today are getting a lot more diverse training than we ever did when I was a rookie cop. And then you got someone like Jeremy who's got his finger on the pulse of it. Jeremy, you can add in what you wanted to say there.
It's just that I know we're coming wheels down on our time here. Just that partnerships are the future of policing. Just us doing it alone, those days are over. And any department that stands in the way of having those partnerships is just going against traffic.
I want to thank all of you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like I could go on and have this discussion for 4 or 5 hours, and maybe it's worth having folks back on. So I will say the film is coming to, I believe, the Yale Schwartzman Center.
It's coming to the Family Center, African American Family Center, 211 Park Street.
Beautiful.
And that's going to be on the 26th, and the film starts, I believe, at 4:35. I can get you the information.
We will share the information, and I just want to remind folks that if you've been with us, you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. I'm Lucy Gellman. This has been Arts Respond with Charlie Grady, Alex Vishno, Jeremy Brewer, and Sergeant Emil Williams. I want to thank all of you so much for being with me today. we could have a long, long discussion about this. I really appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Lucy. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes, and folks can find the film on
STEMfilm.com.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Are we staying on as a follow-up or anything, or are we just bouncing?